this story turned out to be 1,000 times more wicked and evil than I could have ever imagined. And I don't normally do this, but I'm asking you to trust me. Trust me and just watch until the end of this video so that I can show you and tell you exactly what I found and how deep and demonic and dark this story actually is. And trust me, it is all of those things times 1,000. Check this out. I want to start here, and this might not make sense right now, but trust me, it will in a second. All right, take a listen to this video.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members and members of the public. Please join me. God, we thank you for all your many blessings. We thank you for all the ways you show yourself strong in our lives and the lives of the people we serve. We know that only you are the keeper of this great state. You are the shade at our right hand. You preserve us from evil, even to our very soul. We ask for your grace over our session today. Let your peace abide in our hearts and in all our comings and goings. Let our decisions be filled with your wisdom. Apply to us liberally your grace and mercy. May prosperity be forever in our future, from this time forth to eternity. Let us continue to find favor in your sight and remain a beacon, not only for this nation, but for the world. In your strength, amen.
So that was Assemblywoman Lori Wilson. And I thought it was a very crucial starting point that you have some context as to who Assemblywoman Lori Wilson claims to be. She claims to be a woman of faith. She claims to be a woman of God, a believer. Now, this is very interesting, and on your screen, you're looking at a more recent picture of Lori Wilson. That video that you just watched was about 10 months ago. This picture right here was just a few weeks ago, June 23rd. Now, I'm not going to speculate, but obviously she's going through some sort of illness right now that she's battling and that she's fighting. But here's the interesting part. Lori Wilson is at the center of a very, very controversial bill in the state of California that is very likely to pass and to be brought into law. And if that happens, I believe that this has implications, not just in California, but throughout the entire country. California is not going to be the only one to pass this bill. If it does indeed pass, more states are going to jump on the bandwagon, I can assure you. Now, what is this whole bill about? This bill is about protecting the safety, the health, and the welfare of children who are actively in the middle of a custody battle. That sounds all well and dandy, right? That sounds incredible. Of course, we want to protect children. Of course, we want to make sure that they are in the most loving, household possible so that they can thrive and become productive members of society. Who wouldn't want that? Well, here's the thing. Lori Wilson, very interesting woman, as I said. She's the very proud mother of a trans child. Her words, not mine. She is very, very proud to be the mother of a trans child. And her whole inspiration for authoring this bill is just that, is that she believes that in order for us as parents to be loving and to promote a full and comprehensive atmosphere of health and well-being for our children, then we have to be affirming of whatever gender they choose to identify as, even if the child is as small as 7 years old. And this is the exact example that she brought before the committee when she was first introducing this bill. Now, this bill is called AB 957. And to be honest with you, it's getting a lot of attention. But the interesting part, there's a lot of people on the left, a lot of Democrats who are completely opposed to this bill. And I watched this whole committee, this whole hearing at the Senate Judiciary Committee, I watched this whole entire video. It's about 2 hours long. And I would never show you a 2-hour video from a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. I would never do that. But I want to point out a couple highlights from what I saw. And let me just say this. I don't know if you guys know how these work, but they invite the public to come in and to express their opinion, whether or not they support the bill or not. And no exaggeration, 90% of the people from the public who came to this committee, Democrats and Republicans, were completely opposed to this bill. Just so you have an idea of what the general consensus of thought is as it relates to this bill. Now, let me play this clip, and this is going to be a super short clip, but it's going to give you the context that you need to understand the conversation that we're going to have. This is Lori Wilson talking about this bill and what it means to her, and also addressing some of the quote unquote misconceptions that have been floating around in the media. Take a listen.
Good afternoon, Senators. I am here to present AB 957, a bill that would clarify that when it comes to Family Code Section 3011, specifically when it comes to disputes over custody, that the definition of the health, safety, and welfare of the child include a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity. Senators, currently, when parents do not agree on affirming a TGI, which I'll use that acronym regularly, means transgender, gender diverse, and intersex. When a parent do not agree on affirming a TGI child's gender identity, the Family Code fails to provide guidance on how judges should consider the best interests of a TGI child. AB 957 was originally introduced to amend both Family Code 3011 and the Code of Civil Procedure, but after working with the committee, it was narrowed in scope to only amend Family Code 3011. The amendments taken do not substantially differ from its previous version. Our bill was always amending Section 3011 of the Family Code. However, instead of stating that a judge must consider a parent's affirmation of the child's gender identity because it's in the best interest of the child to affirm their gender identity, the amendments provide better clarity that as a judge is considering factors in a custody dispute, the health, safety, and welfare of the child also include the affirmation of a child's identity. This amendment allows judicial discretion when conducting an analysis of the best interests of the child. Given that affirmation can occur in many different ways, the language prevents the creation of a checklist that must be met in order to demonstrate affirmation. I also want to take the opportunity to address some things that have been stated about this bill. I've heard from some folks that our bill does not define what affirmation means. However, a plain language reading of the word affirmation is that to affirm a child's gender identity is to accept and support it. Family Code 3011 also does not strictly define the term health, safety, and welfare, but courts are able to interpret the plain language meaning of these words to account for a myriad of circumstances depending on the case before them. In addition, some have expressed concerns that this bill equates the lack of affirmation on gender identity to abuse. First, our bill is not referencing the criminal code and would not be used as any sort of means of deeming or charging a parent as abusive. Second, it should be stated that this code section is not solely related to abusive behavior. As in the same code section, the judge must also consider the nature and amount of contact with both parents, which has nothing to do with abuse. Some have concerns about forcing medical procedures upon children. We also want to clarify that our bill is not referencing gender-affirming care or gender-affirming health care, which is a separate process between one's doctor and a child's parents, and not something we are asking a judge to consider custody upon. Others have expressed concern that folks who are tolerant of their child's gender identity will be incorrectly labeled as not affirming their child's identity. Affirmation is not binary, just like health, safety, and welfare is not binary. Family courts and judges are looking at the whole picture. If both parents are accepting of their child's gender identity, this issue will not be the thing that tips scale towards any parent. Affirmation of gender identity looks different for each individual, but the primary modality of gender affirmation is family acceptance and social support. It is also a recognition that all people no matter their age, are dynamic and constantly growing and changing. What affirmation looks like at one stage of growth may look very different from another stage. The intent behind our amendment is specifically to allow nuance for the judge to account for similar situations, and the larger issue surrounds parents who are antagonistic to their child's gender identity. Being antagonistic to a child's gender identity dramatically affects a child's mental well-being. Conversely, in TGI children that experience familial acceptance, suicide attempts are reduced by half. TGI youth are already at a higher risk of depression, mental health crisis, self-harm, and suicide than their cis peers. 82% of transgender folks experience suicide ideation, and 40% make a suicide attempt in their lifetime. Furthermore, many TGI children are not safe in their own homes because of a non-informing or abusive caretaker. This leads many TGI youth to run away from home, leaving them vulnerable to housing, instability, exploitation, and abuse. Research demonstrates that family acceptance of LGBTQ plus youth is a crucial protective factor, crucial protective factor in combating depression and substance abuse. Well-rounded social support from friends and family members is strongly associated with the positive mental development, physical health, and overall well-being. AB 957 would center the health and welfare of TGI youth by acknowledging that affirmation of their gender identity is in their best interests. I would like to now...
Affirmation of their gender identity is in your child's best interest. And this is what they're trying to wrap in to be included in what a judge considers when going through a custody battle situation as not the component, but one of the components to what it means to have a loving environment that is healthy, is safe, is a place where a child should be. And she said something very interesting. She said, I don't know if you caught this, but she said, if both parents are affirming of the children's gender, then that issue will not be a factor during the court proceedings. So if one parent is affirming and one parent is not, then most likely the parent who is affirming is going to be considered more loving. And that is the parent who is essentially going to be given custody in that situation. Now, she's the author, but there's also a co-author. There's a co-author, and his name is Scott Wiener. Now, Scott Wiener, I don't know if you have been following the news too much. I'm assuming you do know the story of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And this is exactly who you're looking at on your screen right now. So on your screen, you have the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And in the middle, you have Senator Scott Wiener of California. Scott Wiener has no children. And a lot of people are getting upset. Specifically, Democrats, people on the left, and people who support this bill were getting upset because people like myself were pointing out that he has no children. How would he understand from a parental perspective what is best for our children when he, in fact, doesn't have any children to call his own? But nonetheless, he is an author on this bill as well. And he is a big supporter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. In fact, I don't know if you saw this, but he actually invited Sister Roma. So Sister Roma is one of the members of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. He invited her to the Capitol building to be honored as his guest of honor, because as he stated, Sister Roma is an individual who displays the utmost community service is an example of what an upstanding community member is, specifically in California. Now, I want to show you something that I thought was extremely interesting. And this is another one of the senators from the hearing from the committee. And something that I was thinking about in reference to this bill is it's not very clear as to what they mean by affirmation. What do you mean by affirmation? What do you mean by affirmation? Because that could mean a lot of different things. If a parent, for example, is affirming of their child who was a little girl but now wants to be a little boy, okay, that's one thing. But how far does affirming go? Because as Lori Wilson said in her opening statement, affirmation is non-binary. Affirmation could look different depending on the stage that that child is in. So it could be a thing where maybe you have two parents who are affirming, but one parent is for gender affirmation surgery and one parent is against it. Then who would you rule in favor of? Because at this point, they're making it seem like gender affirmation is the healthiest thing that we could be doing for our children. And if gender affirmation is a part of the health and well-being, then wouldn't it make sense that in their logic, as it relates to this bill, wouldn't it make sense that gender affirming care would also be the next step to affirming that child and also giving that child the most loving and healthy situation? Take a listen to what this senator had to say. I thought it was extremely interesting. Just so you know, he did vote no on this bill, but take a listen to the points that he made.
This is a difficult issue, and I have the greatest of respect for my colleagues, Senator Wiener and Senator Laird. Senator Laird and I have known each other for a lot of years. And I don't come to the question with any particular bias one way or the other. But gender affirmation care is a relatively new thing. Gender dysphoria is not, it's just more recognized recently, and gender affirmation care is a way of treating that in a way that Senator Wiener eloquently defended, and I get that. The issue is, though, other countries around the world are beginning to question this. The UK, in fact, did a comprehensive review of gender-affirming care, and they described the social transition as an active intervention with significant effects on child or young persons in terms of their psychological functioning, and emphasized that it is not a neutral act and better information is needed about outcomes. The systemic review found the evidence on managing gender incongruence inconclusive due to lack of long-term data. Similarly, Sweden, Finland, and Norway have since rejected gender affirmative care for children. Now, I don't know which side of it is correct. I'm just saying I'm new to the issue, and I understand what Senator Laird said in clarifying what this bill does, but the elevation of the issue accepts gender affirmation care as an accomplished science and accepts gender affirmation as the appropriate approach by a parent. And my concern is, given the conclusions of the UK and those three Scandinavian countries, not exactly restrictive type societies, I have concerns about making the conclusion that this bill does, bringing it into a custody dispute.
Is that a question, Senator Galo?
Okay.
No, it's not. Okay.
The author is certainly welcome to address it in her close.
All right.
I just want to make sure, if it's okay to clarify.
Sure.
Are you noting that gender affirmation care is in the language of the bill, or are you noting that gender affirmation is equivalent to gender affirmation care? So I know how to respond appropriately.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that they're equivalent. What I am saying is that the supposition of the bill is that gender affirmation should be considered in custody issues.
Okay.
And that, I think, brings along the implication that to make the affirmation that the care, gender affirmation care, would be appropriate, and that should be considered in a custody case. And
Thank you for that
I saw
clarification.
you
I'll respond.
shake your head, but
Not,
I
I'll do it in the close then.
understand.
Okay.
It,
Have an
it is
understand.
very difficult to conclude to the contrary of that.
Understood.
So, and this is exactly what I just said. So you're saying that the parent who affirms the gender is most likely the one that's going to get custody, assuming that they are financially able to and that they're not insane and stuff like that. They're probably going to get custody if they affirm their gender. But here's the separation that Lori is trying to make. She's trying to say that there's a difference between gender affirmation and gender affirming care, which I understand there is a difference. But if you're going to say that gender affirmation, just the fact that as a parent, I say that, hey, I accept that you want to be a boy now, even though you were born as a girl. I accept that you want to be a boy now. I accept that I love you. That's okay. I accept it. That would be affirmation. So if you're saying that affirmation is healthy, then wouldn't you have to also say that the care that is associated with gender affirmation would also be healthy for the child? And wouldn't that also be a reasonable step that would happen after you affirm that child's gender? There's a lot of holes and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But you remember I talked about Scott Wiener. I want to show you what Scott Wiener said. And just so y'all know, this committee, this hearing was open to the public, and they had people that actually called in. This is going to blow your mind. And I was watching this and I was like, wow, I can't believe that actually happened right now. But this should just let you understand how people feel about Scott Wiener. Scott Wiener is the co-author to this bill. All right. Take a listen to what this woman said when she called in.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rochelle, and I am in San Joaquin County, and I am strongly opposed to that pedophile Scott Wiener holding office.
All right, thank you, moderator. Next caller, please. Next caller.
And this was pretty much the theme throughout this entire hearing. A lot of people, whether they're on the left or the right, simply do not support this, and it does not make a lot of sense. And the two people that are bringing it to the forefront, it raises a lot of questions. It raises a lot of questions. But take a listen to what Scott Wiener had to say in defense to the backlash that he's been hearing about him being a part of this bill. It's extremely interesting how he tries to defend this bill. Take a listen.
I've been following a lot of the commentary online and in the media about this bill. And unfortunately, there's been a pretty massive misinformation campaign about this bill by the right-wing media and right-wing social media influencers. It is tragically a massive and well-orchestrated campaign to erase trans children, to pretend they don't exist, to suppress them, which honestly is no different than the suppression that we have seen for centuries, the suppression of gay and lesbian kids. And we need to remember that all the arguments that we hear against so many parts of this bill, and against acknowledging the existence of trans kids, those have all been made against gay and lesbian kids. That you can change them, that it's not real, that it's a phase, that they're confused, that it's a mental health problem. Let's not pretend for a second that the attacks on and the attempts to erase trans kids, let's not pretend for a second that that is not also an attack on gay and lesbian kids. It absolutely is. I want to thank the author for introducing this bill and for leading on this bill and for persevering on this bill, even despite the just horrific personal attacks that have been launched against.
Let me say something real quick. He said he wanted to thank the author for leading on this bill because he's the co-author of this bill. All right. Lori Wilson is the main author on this bill. I'm going to say this. I don't have really anything to back up this claim that I'm about to make. But I think when you look at what this bill stands for, and when you look at what Scott Wiener stands for, now just a little bit of backstory, Scott Wiener is the first openly gay senator of California. This bill would perfectly align with everything that he stands for. But here's the problem. I really think, and once again, this is just me speculating, all right? I really think that there was a part of him that wanted to lead this bill. But don't you think it would look a little bit strange if Scott Wiener was the leader of this bill? Given the fact that he doesn't have any children, given the fact that there's already a narrative that he's coming after our children, and given the fact that he's so supportive of groups like Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, who are actually very, very manipulative and very, very dark and are actually preying on children, which I'm going to show you in a moment. But I truly think that he probably did want to lead this bill, but the optics would have been so bad if he were to lead this bill that it wouldn't have had a chance to make it through because people already don't support it. People already don't support it. I think he really wanted to lead this bill, but instead, what did they do? They put Lori Wilson, who, let's just be completely honest, and this is not hate or anything like that, but Lori Wilson is obviously a black woman, right? And she has a trans child. It basically works perfectly with what they're trying to do. They always try to tie in these types of issues with race. And if they can have a black woman who has a trans child herself lead this bill, the optics on that side, based on the agenda that they're trying to accomplish, look way more better than if Scott Wiener were the one to lead on this bill. That's just my opinion. But let me get back to showing you exactly what he said. And then I'm going to get into something that's even more disturbing that if I didn't show you, you probably would not even believe it.
Sir, the author is someone with deep lived experience who knows exactly what she is talking about. I also just want to note that in the right-wing media, there has been at times an erasure of the author's leadership. There are articles that leave her name out entirely and only mention my name, even though I am not leading on this bill. I am not the lead author of this bill. They either minimize her role or erase it entirely. Why would you do that? We should ask ourselves why they would do that. Because it benefits their narrative that this is about perversion and harming kids. It benefits that narrative to say that the bill is somehow introduced by a gay man who doesn't have children, using photos of me from Folsom Street Fair. I like those photos, but why choose those photos over other photos? It benefits their narrative way more than acknowledging that the author who is leading on this bill is a straight woman with kids, including a trans kid who knows exactly what she's talking about.
Yeah, but here's the thing. She might know exactly what she's talking about for her situation, but how does that make her the representative for all parents in California and potentially in other states if this bill were to pass, which it looks like it's going to pass? Her experience is a very minor example in totality of the experience of all parents around the nation. And just because something that she deems to be good does not mean that I deem that to be good or that other parents deem that to be good. In fact, we deem that to be a form of evilness. She deems it to be a form of love, whereas I view it to say love is affirming who God created you to be. That is love, because that's the truth. If God wanted you to be somebody different, he would have made you that person. I view that as being love, affirming God's truth. So how is she suddenly the spokesperson for all parents? Because she has experience in that situation? Okay. I have experience in my situation of how I parent my children, just like so many other parents do.
It's straight up homophobia, and it's disrespectful to the author. This bill is not about gender affirming care, but that has been raised over and over and over again online and here today. So I want to say a few things. There's this narrative that people are somehow like going to stealing kids and forcing them to have gender affirming care. There's also this narrative that a massive number of people transition and regret it. These narratives are false. In California, gender affirming care other than counseling can only happen if a parent consents to it. The age of consent, if the kid is not emancipated, is 18. So when kids in California receive gender affirming care, it is overwhelmingly with the consent and the support of their parents. We also know from studies that the vast, vast majority of trans people, including kids who transition, do not regret their transition. There was a review of 27 studies involving almost 8,000 teens and adults who transitioned, and 1% regretted their decision. Of course, for anyone who does regret, we should support them, and they should have access to all of the health care that they need, but that should not deprive the other 99% from receiving health care. We also know that gender affirmation and gender affirming care dramatically benefits the mental health of trans kids. There was an NIH study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, quote, transgender and non-binary youth sustained improvement in depression and anxiety over 2 years after starting treatment with gender-affirming hormones. A study in the Journal of the American Medical Association about youth 13 to 20, those receiving care had a 60% lower odds of depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality compared to youth who hadn't received cares. And we know there are various studies that show that trans youth with supportive parents have significantly lower risk of suicidality. Trans kids with supportive parents have significantly lower risk of attempting suicide. People, I think some have been led to believe that this bill somehow applies to every family, and that we heard it at the beginning, that this complete misrepresentation of the bill, that the cops are going to come into people's homes and grab their kids because you're not affirming enough. This bill is about divorce proceedings and custody. That's what this is about. This bill is about situations where the family court is already involved, where you are already in court because you have kids, you're getting a divorce, and the court has the job of deciding custody, visitation, etc. Where the court is already scrutinizing every aspect of the family's life. Courts consider a huge number of factors when they decide custody and visitation. Many, many factors. All this bill does is clarify that among all of those many, many other factors, that affirmation of the child's gender should be considered. Because we know that gender affirmation has mental health benefits. And we know that having supportive parents makes it less likely that that child will attempt to kill themselves. Are we really going to say that those facts are somehow not relevant to a divorce and custody proceeding? Of course, the court should take those into account, and that's why this bill is important.
He says, and it's a good point that he makes. A lot of people think that this bill applies to every single family, right? But this bill is only specific to the families who are actively going through a custody battle within the court system, right? But here's the thing. You can't tell me that this bill is not going to set up a potential where that could be the very case. Because if they're wrapping this into what it means to be loving and provide substantial, adequate care to your child, and what it means to be a responsible parent, if that is being wrapped into this idea of gender affirmation, then how is that not going to, at one point, going to be considered from the standpoint of, well, let's look at parents who are not affirming in the court or outside of the court, just in general. Because if they're not taking care of their children to the standard that we deem to be a loving and healthy environment, then we have children who are in danger. I think it's a slippery slope, as a lot of these topics have proven to be throughout history. A very, very slippery slope. Now, the most dark twist that I found while researching this story has to do with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And like I said, Scott Wiener, the congressman who you saw speak, is a very big fan and a very big supporter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. In fact, I want to show you a video really quickly as to his reasoning behind bringing the Sisters of Indulgence, or bringing one of the members from this quote unquote nun group, to the Capitol building in Sacramento. Take a listen to this. Should be embracing them and not puking all over them, because they're examples in the community. They raise hundreds of thousands of dollars doing, community work, and they donate it to, people who are at risk and people who are marginalized and all that kind of stuff, right? And, even what's very, very interesting, even just this week, just a week ago, Scott Wiener posted about this bill. It said, "Yes, in God's backyard." So this is Scott Wiener. So Scott Wiener, he got a bill passed which would allow churches to forego the required permits and stuff like that in order to build affordable housing on their land, which sounds incredible. That sounds great. If churches can provide affordable housing for people and not have to jump through all the the hoops and ladders from a government standpoint to build housing on the land that they owned, then I'm all for that. But it's just so interesting how he can sit here and say that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence are completely with Christians, and that they're not, mocking Christians, and that they're not trying to, be harmful or hateful towards Christians in any way, shape, or form. This is Sister Roma's page, and this is where things get really twisted. I'm telling you right now, this is where things get really twisted. This is Sister Roma's page. So Sister Roma is the one that Scott Wiener was talking about when he said that, Sister Roma does all this amazing work, and that's why Sister Roma deserves to be honored in Sacramento, right? This is it's so wild. I'm losing my words, how wild this stuff is. Sister Roma posted this a few days ago. Now, let me make this full screen so that you can see it. Let me read the caption for you. It says, "I'm so tired of conservative Catholics and other Christians, quote unquote, saying that the SFS sisters are a hate group. We have never told you that you can't worship however you choose. We have never said that you cannot believe whatever you want to believe. And we certainly have never brought a case to the Supreme Court designed to strip Christians of their civil rights. We are not mocking Christ. We are not mocking nuns. We are mocking you. You and your thinly veiled homophobia and transphobia, you who weaponize your religion to justify your bigotry, you who scream about religious persecution in order to persecute and eradicate others, the only hate group I see is holding a Bible and wielding a cross. Shame on you. So these are the same people. This is the same organization who Scott Wiener is supporting. This is the same organization who Scott Wiener says is essentially the true Catholic Church. These are the true Christians, according to Scott Wiener. I want to show you this. This is from the Instagram of the SFS Sisters, an organization that what is her name again? Sister Roma is a part of this organization right here. This is where it gets very dark and demonic, and it goes in a direction that I'd never even really thought was imaginable, especially considering that they have the support of a California senator, the same senator who is co-authoring a bill aimed at, quote unquote, protecting the safety, health, and well-being of our children. Let me read this caption to you. It says, "See you all tomorrow, Saturday, 12/3." So this was last year, December 2nd, 2022. It says, "'Tis the season to celebrate one cold night very soon. In the wee hours of the morning, children will be visited by magical beings. But not Santa this time. It's Krampus time. Children will be visited by magical beings. Join us in San Francisco for Krampus and the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence as they pay homage to the sinister and scary side of Christmas at their 4th annual Krampus pageant." I don't know if y'all know who Krampus is. I don't know if y'all know who Krampus is. It says Krampus in Central European is a Central European popular legend. It's a half goat, half demon monster that punishes misbehaving children at Christmas time. And even to take it a step further in terms of Krampus, this is a video that I found from traditional celebrations of Krampus. And I want you to take a look at this video and see if you see anything that looks a little bit off to you. Just a child in a cage, right? Just a child in a cage being carried away by a demonic goat figure. And this is the same celebration. This is the same demonic tradition, the same demonic spirits that the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, the same organization who Senator Scott Wiener says are basically example Catholics, they're example Christians. These are the same spirits that they emulate, that they worship, that they celebrate. And this was at their Krampus pageant just last year, just in December. And I don't know how you can say that this is godly in any sense. I don't know how you can support this in any way, shape, or form, especially once you actually know the true meaning of what it is that they're actually doing. Especially once you understand that this whole Krampus worship, this whole demon, this whole spirit of Krampus is specifically designed to punish children, to haunt children, to prey on your children. There's one video that I want to show you. You see this first part right here. Let me make it full screen for you. So Krampus is supposed to be the evil and demonic brother of Satan. And you see how he's whipping this fence right here with that broom type of thing. So he's supposed to be dressed up as Krampus. And the legend goes that Krampus, and I understand that this is, folklore or whatever you want to call it, right? But there's still people who celebrate this, who worship this, who dress up like this, and they take their children to go and see these things, right? He's whipping this fence, right? That whip that he's using is said to be a very similar whip to what Krampus would use to whip bad children. So instead of giving, how they say, like, if you're bad for Christmas, you get coal. Well, Krampus would actually come to, your house and whip your children. And here's the weird part. According to the legend, it would say that if Krampus came and whipped your child, then your child would be given the gift of fertility. And this is your sisters of perpetual indulgence. These are the individuals that Senator Scott Wiener was so adamant should be in the Capitol building to be honored for their community work. It's just so interesting to me that we have this organization that is clearly mocking Christianity, is clearly worshiping other demonic spirits that quite literally prey on children. We have a senator who is adamantly supporting this group, who is honoring these spirits who are preying on children. And this same senator is co-authoring a bill that is supposed to be for the safety and protection of our children. Now, when I first uncovered all of this, my initial response was, I need to get the heck out of California. If you did not know, I live in California. And my first response was that I need to get out of here. It's dark, it's demonic, it's disturbing. And who knows where all of this is going to go. And I want to play this video for you real quick. I believe this is Senator Scott Wilk. You may or may not have seen this clip, but I want to play this for you really fast. Take a listen.
I'm now in year 11 in the state legislature, and all the time we're proposing policies to protect children. Well, after 11 years, I've come to a conclusion that we need to start protecting parents. That's just not happening. I've been here and witnessed a full frontal assault on charter schools, taking away parents' choice and how their children are going to be educated, to the detriment particularly of children of color. In recent years, we have put government bureaucrats between parents, children, and doctors when it comes to medical care. And now we have this, where if a parent does not support the ideology of the government, they're going to be taken away from the home. Now, I agree with both Senator Wiener and Senator Laird that today it only involves divorce proceedings. And frankly, a judge can already factor this in. But I can assure you it's not going to end with divorce proceedings. In the past, when we've had these discussions and I've seen parental rights atrophied, I've encouraged people to keep fighting. I've changed my mind on that. If you love your children, you need to flee California. You need to flee. We are moving towards the pathway of the Handmaid's Tale. California is becoming the new Gilead, and it just breaks my heart. I'm born and raised in this state. I love this state. I'm not going to stay in this state because it's just too oppressive, and I believe in freedom, and so I'm going to move to America when I leave the legislature.
And that's the same feeling that I had as well, especially uncovering all of this stuff that I just laid out for y'all. And the truth of the matter is, I say this and I'll say it again. We are in a very real spiritual warfare, but I want to offer something that you may not be thinking about, because like I said, this looks like it's going to pass in California. And when it passes in California, I pray that it doesn't. But if it does, and it looks like it's going to, it's not just going to stop at California. There's going to be other states that adopt this law. And I was reminded of something in the Bible. 1 Kings 19. Y'all remember when Elijah fled from Jezebel. And this is right after the whole encounter where Elijah literally just shut down all of these false prophets, right? And they had this whole big ceremony to see, okay, whose God is the real God? Is your God of, Baal? Is that the real God, or is Elijah's God the real God? And they had this whole thing, right? And all these false prophets all gathered around because they're trying to see who could light this altar on fire first, and whose God would come down from heaven and light this altar on fire first. And all of these false prophets were doing all of this crazy stuff, all of these rituals, all of this dancing, banging on drums, like, slicing their arms and stuff like that, all this crazy stuff for hours, and nothing happened. Literally nothing happened. And then Elijah, he prays. He doesn't do any crazy rituals or crazy worship. He prays, and then he dumps a bunch of water on this altar that they made. I think it's an altar. I could be wrong. But he dumps a bunch of water on this altar that they made to make it even more difficult. And then God comes through and lights it on fire so undeniably that Jezebel hears about it. Now, Jezebel was probably at this point in time the most powerful individual at this point in time, right? And Jezebel hears about it. And Jezebel says that, on everything that I love, basically, I'm going to kill you. And if I don't kill you, then may the gods do to me what I'm planning to do to you. And I want to read this to you real quick, because Elijah is in a point in time where he just had one of the biggest victories. But he ran away from the place that God wanted him to be. He ran away from the calling that God spoke into his life, because Jezebel was trying to kill him, right? In 1 Kings 19, verse 9, it says, because Elijah ran to a cave. It says, there he came to a cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him. He said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? What are you doing here? You ran from the place that I placed you. God didn't say that, but that's just me unpacking the verse. What are you doing here? He said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only am left, and they seek my life. So he's saying, I'm the only true, believer who's still here. And they're trying to kill me too. And he said to God to take it away, essentially to take his life, because he's just so done. He's so overwhelmed that he just doesn't want to deal with it anymore. He sees all the wickedness. He sees all of everything that's going on, all these people who are so, ungodly, and he sees them, prospering, so it seems, and he wants nothing to do with it. In verse 11, it says, and he said, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore through the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, the sound of a low whisper. Verse 13, and when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And behold, there came a voice to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? And he says the same thing. I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars. They're acting crazy. They're acting disrespectful. They don't care about you, God. They killed your prophets with the sword, and even I only am left, and they seek to take my life away. So he says the same thing again. And the Lord said to him, go return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael to be king over Syria, and Jehu, the son of Nimshi, you shall anoint to be king over Israel, and Elijah, the son of Shabbat of Abel Mehoiah, you shall anoint to be prophet in your place. In your place. You know, Elijah was taken up. He was taken up. He was given what he wanted. He didn't want the calling that God had given to him. He didn't want the ministry that God had given to him because he was in a place that he deemed to be so wicked that he didn't see any way that God was moving in that situation. So God says, you know what? My will is going to be done no matter what. But I'll give you what you want because you have free will. I'll give you what you want. You don't want to do this anymore? Then fine. You don't have to do this anymore. But I'm going to put somebody else in your place to accomplish the will that I'm trying to accomplish through you. And here's what's really interesting. Verse 18, it says, yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal. Why am I struggling with that? It's Baal, right? And every mouth that has not kissed him. So God is basically saying, look, you think that everything is so wicked. You're so blind. You're so concerned about the wickedness that you're not even seeing the goodness that I'm doing in the very place that you think is so wicked. I have 7,000 people, and, based on the population at that time, that's a lot of people. He had 7,000 people in Israel that did not bow down, that did not compromise, that were not falling into this demonic oppression, that were not leaving the true faith. He had 7,000 faithful ones. And Elijah couldn't even see it because he's so concerned about the wickedness that he's seeing with his own eyes that he can't even take a step back and see what God is doing in totality. I want to read something else to you real quick. This is Jeremiah 12. Very similar. Very similar, because oftentimes we see all this wickedness going on. And even for myself living in California, I see all this wickedness going on, and my first instinct is to leave. But I can't even see all the goodness that God is actually doing here in California. There are faithful ones. There are righteous ones. There is a remnant. And for me to leave the place that God has put me to run this ministry, to fight on the ground, I would basically be throwing up my hands and giving up. And same thing goes for you. No matter where you live, if it's California or somewhere else, this type of law, these types of bills are probably going to make its way to your state as well. Does that mean that you just leave? You can if you want to, but God's will is going to be done in heaven. as it is on earth, or the other way around. God's will is going to be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's a promise. That's a promise. And if you want to leave, then he's going to take somebody else and put that person in your place. It's a scary thought. This is Jeremiah 12. It says Jeremiah's complaint. Righteous are you, O Lord, when I complain to you, yet I would plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked always prosper? Listen to this. Why do all the treacherous thrive? You plant them and they take root. They grow and produce fruit. Listen to this. You are near in their mouth and far from their heart. We have all these people, and you remember the very first video. You remember the very first video that I showed you of Lori Wilson praying. We have all these people who are proclaiming God with their mouth, but they're far from him in their hearts. And I pray that she repents. I pray that she turns. I pray that she finds the truth. That's my prayer for everybody. But don't get discouraged when you see people who are proclaiming God with their mouth, but are far from him in their heart and their actions and their behaviors. The ones that claim to be believers, but they're bowing the knee on certain topics that may be controversial, that may compromise their livelihood, that may compromise their reputation. Right? But I want to read you something real quick. It says, the Lord answers Jeremiah. This is for everybody. It says, if you have raced with men on foot and they have wearied you, how will you compete with the horses? So he's saying, you've been racing with men. You've been running with men on foot and you're tired. How are you going to hold up when you're racing with horses? It's not even bad yet. You might think that things are bad. This is for all of us. We might think that things are bad on this earth right now. It's not even bad. It's not even bad. We actually have it good right now. And the Lord goes on to say, and if in a safe land you are so trusting, what will you do in the thicket of Jordan? So God's basically saying, you're blessed to be where you are right now. God is telling Jeremiah, you're blessed to be where you are right now, although it may seem in your limited vision, in your limited perspective, that everything is so wicked. You're actually blessed to be where you are. There's other places that have it a lot worse. And I need you to be faithful and strong and have endurance in the place that I put you, and fight the righteous fight, the good fight in the place that I put you, because there's going to be some times that are going to be even more challenging. And I need you to be prepared for those times. But if you're going to run away during these times that you perceive to be so bad, how are you going to be prepared when times actually start to get really bad? You're not going to have any endurance. You're not going to have any endurance. We look at the world right now and we see all the negative that's going on. We see all these bills and all these laws and all the politics that are happening, but we forget to actually notice the goodness of God that is all around us. The fact of the matter is, the goodness of God is far outweighing the evilness that we see right now. It's far outweighing the evilness that we see right now. So much so that my camera just overheated, but it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Because we see all this wickedness that's going on. We see all of these things that these people are supporting, the people that are supposed to be, quote unquote, protecting our best interests. And we see where their allegiance truly lies. And it's easy for us to get discouraged. but the goodness of God far outweighs all of this wickedness. We're still here, right? We're still breathing. We still have a mission. We still have a calling in the place that God has put us. Don't forget that. All right. Appreciate y'all watching. Subscribe. Like this video. I'm out, y'all.